The crystal towers of Zephyros Prime gleamed under 3 moons as Commander Velith stood before the High Council. His people had ruled 12 star systems for 3,000 years, but now everything was about to end. The Kryn swarm was coming and nothing could stop them. 17 civilizations have fallen in the past year, Velith reported, his crystalline skin shifting to dark purple with stress. The Kryn consume everything. They adapt to every weapon we use. Our outer colonies will fall in 4 days. The council members whispered among themselves, their telepathic voices creating a chorus of fear. Elder Morphix raised one 3-fingered hand for silence. Then we must use the forbidden ritual. We will summon warriors from another dimension to fight for us. Velith felt his heart sink. The ancient texts spoke of the summoning ritual, a dangerous practice that could pull creatures from other realities. Legend said it would bring savage beasts, monsters that knew only violence and war. It was their last hope. Deep beneath the capital city, 12 mystics gathered in a chamber carved from pure crystal. They had spent days preparing, inscribing symbols of power on the floor and walls. Now they stood in a circle, their minds linking together as they began to chant. Energy crackled through the air. The symbols began to glow with impossible colors. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as they tore open a hole between dimensions. The portal grew larger, swirling with rainbow light. The mystics pushed harder, calling out to the void. They reached across space and time, searching for warriors. They expected claws. They expected fangs. They expected monsters that would terrify even the Kryn. Instead, 5 humans stumbled through the gateway. Captain Jake Morrison of the United States Space Force still held his coffee mug. One moment he had been standing in the cafeteria of Orbital Station 7, talking about the upcoming supply run. The next moment, reality twisted around him and he was somewhere else entirely. Lieutenant Sophie Blake appeared beside him, her datapad still in her hands. She immediately started recording everything she saw, her training overriding her shock. The chamber was massive, filled with strange alien beings who looked just as surprised to see her. Sergeant Danny Cruz dropped into a combat stance the instant he materialized. His hand went to his hip, reaching for a weapon that was not there. He scanned the room quickly, counting exits and potential threats. 12 aliens in robes, 3 doorways, high ceiling. He filed the information away. Dr. Lisa Park clutched her medical kit and tried to understand what had just happened. She was a scientist trained to observe and analyze, but nothing in her education had prepared her for aliens and dimensional portals. She took a deep breath and forced herself to stay calm. Engineer Chris Dalton adjusted his glasses and looked around with wonder. The architecture was impossible by Earth standards. Crystal growing in perfect geometric patterns, energy flowing through walls without any visible power source. His mind immediately began trying to figure out how it all worked. The Zephron mystics stared at the humans in horror. These creatures were small and soft. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no visible signs of strength. One of them was even holding some kind of drinking container. Commander Velith entered the chamber and froze. This could not be right. The ritual was supposed to bring them salvation, not these weak-looking beings. He approached slowly, raising one hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. When Velith touched Jake's mind with his telepathy, he recoiled instantly. Behind the human's calm exterior was something terrifying. The creature's thoughts moved at incredible speed, analyzing everything, planning for every possibility. It was like looking into the mind of a predator that never stopped hunting. "What are you?" Velith asked, and somehow the humans understood him through the telepathic link. Jake carefully set his coffee mug down on a nearby crystal surface. He looked around at the aliens, taking in every detail. His team was safe for now, but they were clearly prisoners. Time to establish communication and figure out what was going on. "Captain Jake Morrison, United States Space Force," he said clearly, "and you just made a very big mistake." The words hung in the air. The mystics looked at each other in confusion. What kind of warrior announced himself so formally? Where were the roars of rage, the displays of strength? Sophie moved closer to Jake, her datapad still recording. "Sir, I'm reading significant energy signatures. Whatever they did to bring us here required massive power. This is not random. They wanted to summon something." "Warriors," Velith said, his telepathic voice carrying resignation. "We are facing extinction. The Kryn swarm devours entire worlds. We use the ancient ritual to summon fighters from another dimension. But instead of the savage beasts of legend, we got you. Chris had been examining the ritual symbols on the floor. These are quantum displacement markers. Incredibly sophisticated. You basically punched a hole through dimensional barriers and pulled us through. The energy requirements alone are staggering. Danny relaxed slightly from his combat stance but remained alert. So you kidnapped us to fight your war? We are desperate, Velith admitted. The Kryn cannot be stopped. They have destroyed civilizations that were far more advanced than yours. What can you possibly do against them? Lisa spoke up, her voice steady despite the situation. Commander, before we discuss what we can or cannot do, we need information. Tell us about this Kryn swarm. Everything you know. The Zephron commander studied the 5 humans. They were adapting remarkably fast to their situation. No panic, no rage, just calm assessment and questions. Perhaps there was more to them than appearance suggested. Come with me, Velith said. I will show you what we face. Then you will understand why we are willing to try anything, even summoning unknown creatures from another dimension. As they followed the commander through crystal corridors, Jake kept his team close. Sophie documented everything, creating maps and taking notes. Danny memorized their route and identified defensive positions. Lisa analyzed their alien hosts, looking for any signs of deception or threat. Chris studied the technology around them, his mind already racing with possibilities. They had been pulled from their reality into an alien war. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and impossibly far from home, but they were United States Space Force. They were trained for the unexpected, and they were human. The aliens had wanted warriors. They were about to learn what that really meant. The command center was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star systems and fleet movements. Alien officers moved between stations, their crystalline bodies glowing with different colors as they worked. Everything was elegant and beautiful, even in preparation for war. Commander Velith activated the main display. A massive cloud appeared, dark and writhing like a living thing. As it moved closer, the humans could see it was made of thousands of individual ships, all organic and alive. The Kryn swarm, Velith explained. Each ship is a creature bred for war. They share a single mind, moving with perfect coordination. They feel no fear and show no mercy. When they arrive at a planet, they consume everything. Plants, animals, buildings, even the air itself. Nothing remains. Jake studied the display carefully. The Kryn ships had no obvious weapons, but they did not need any. They simply landed and devoured. How fast do they move? They will reach our outer colonies in 4 days, Velith said. We have tried everything to stop them. Energy weapons barely slow them down. They adapt to whatever we use against them. Missiles and bombs just feed them more matter to consume. We have lost 17 defensive fleets trying to stop them. Sophie was taking detailed notes. What about their biology? You said they share one mind. How does that work? A Zephron scientist stepped forward, her name translated as Pelith. They communicate through biological signals, chemical markers that travel through space. Every creature in the swarm receives the same instructions instantly. It makes them incredibly efficient. Chris perked up at that. Wait, chemical signals? That means they need a medium to carry the signals. They are not using quantum entanglement or anything fancy, just really advanced pheromones. That matters? Felith asked. Everything matters, Danny said. He had been studying the tactical display. You have been fighting them head-on. Big fleet actions trying to overpower them with numbers and firepower. Has that worked even once? The silence in the command center answered his question. Lisa moved closer to the biological data. They adapt to weapons, but can they adapt to environmental changes? What happens if you alter their communication medium? Pelith looked confused. Why would we do that? Space is space. We cannot change the basic conditions of vacuum. No, but you can introduce interference, Lisa said. If they rely on chemical signals, then other chemicals could disrupt those signals, like jamming a radio frequency. Jake was starting to see a pattern. The Zephrons were incredibly advanced, but they thought in very straight lines. They saw a problem and tried to overpower it with their superior technology. They had never considered using the Kryn's own biology against them. Commander, we need detailed information, Jake said. Everything you have on Kryn biology, behavior patterns, communication methods. Also your fleet capabilities, weapon systems, and available resources. Why? Velith asked. What can 5 beings possibly do that our entire empire could not? Sophie answered before Jake could. Commander, Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We are not the strongest or the fastest species on Earth. We survived because we learned to think differently. We use tools, strategy, and tactics. We find weaknesses and exploit them. That is what makes us dangerous. Over the next 3 days, the humans worked non-stop. The Zephrons gave them a suite of rooms to use as their base, and it quickly became a chaos of activity. Chris had dismantled half a dozen Zephron devices and was rebuilding them in ways their creators never imagined. He worked with Pelith, the young scientist, teaching her to think outside the rigid structures of Zephron engineering. She was a quick learner, and soon they were bouncing ideas off each other at a dizzying pace. Danny worked with the Zephron military, and it was frustrating for everyone involved. The aliens had strict codes of honor and preferred direct confrontation. When Danny suggested ambushes and false retreats, they were horrified. But he kept pushing, showing them simulations of how these tactics could work. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to understand. Lisa spent her time with the medical team studying Kryn biology. The aliens had extensive data from captured specimens, but they had never thought to weaponize it. Lisa saw possibilities everywhere. The Kryn's hive mind made them efficient, but it also made them vulnerable. If you could break that connection, the entire swarm would fall apart. Sophie created organization from the chaos. She built timelines, coordinated between teams, and made sure everyone had what they needed. Her tactical mind saw how all the pieces fit together. The Zephrons had the technology and resources. They just needed someone to show them how to use them differently. Jake moved between all the teams, overseeing everything. He pushed when needed, supported when necessary, and always kept the big picture in mind. He also spent time with Commander Velith, building trust and understanding. "Your people fight with honor," Jake said during one of their conversations. "That is admirable. But the Kryn do not care about honor. They only care about survival and feeding. You cannot fight them the same way you would fight another honorable civilization." Velith's colors shifted to troubled gray. "You are asking us to become monsters to fight monsters." "No," Jake said firmly. "I am asking you to become smart. There is nothing dishonorable about using strategy. Every advantage you have, every resource at your disposal, should be used to protect your people. That is not monstrous. That is survival." On the 3rd day, they presented their plan to the High Council. The chamber was packed with officials, military leaders, and scientists, all of them skeptical that 5 aliens could solve a problem that had defeated their best minds. Jake stood before them, his team behind him. "The Kryn swarm is coming to your outer colonies. You were planning to defend those worlds with your fleet, fighting a conventional battle. That strategy will fail, just like it has failed 17 times before." Murmurs of protest rippled through the chamber, but Jake continued. "Instead, we suggest you evacuate your colonies. Pull everyone back to your core worlds. Leave the colonies completely empty. Abandon our people," an admiral shouted. "That is cowardice." "No," Sophie said, stepping forward. "It is strategy. The Kryn want to feed. Give them empty worlds with stockpiles of organic material. Make it so attractive they cannot resist. Draw them in." Chris activated a holographic display. "While they are feeding on the surface, we hit them from space. Not with energy weapons or missiles. With rocks." The chamber erupted in confusion. Rocks? They were facing extinction, and these humans wanted to throw rocks? Danny smiled at their reaction. "Not just rocks, asteroids, big ones. We accelerate them to a significant percentage of light speed and drop them on the Kryn while they feed. The kinetic energy alone will be devastating. No shields, no adaptation, just physics." Lisa brought up the biological data. "The survivors will retreat. When they do, we deploy a chemical agent designed to disrupt their communication, break the hive-mind connection, and they become just confused animals, easy targets for your fleet." The council sat in stunned silence. The plan was brutal, efficient, and completely unlike anything they would have conceived. Elder Morphix finally spoke. "This will work?" Jake met his eyes steadily. "Yes, because we are not trying to overpower the Kryn. We are going to outsmart them." The evacuation of the outer colonies began immediately. Massive transport ships arrived at 3 worlds, loading millions of Zephron civilians. It was chaos and fear, families leaving their homes with only what they could carry. Many did not understand why they had to leave. Some thought their government had given up, but they left, trusting that their leaders knew best. Within 2 days, the colonies were empty except for massive warehouses filled with organic material, crops, processed foods, biological waste, everything the Kryn would find irresistible. It was bait for a trap. Chris worked around the clock in the asteroid belt. The Zephrons had mining operations there, and he took control of several mining ships. He selected 37 asteroids, each one the size of a city block. Then he attached simple thruster units to each one, nothing fancy or complicated. Palith worked alongside him, her scientific curiosity fully engaged. "These thrusters are so basic," she said. "They will take days to move these asteroids into position." "That is the point," Chris explained, checking his calculations again. "We start the moving now aimed at the colonies. By the time the Kryn arrive and start feeding, these rocks will be falling toward them at incredible speed, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. But surely they will detect the asteroids." Chris grinned. "That is the beautiful part. These thrusters are cold fuel chemical rockets, no energy signature worth detecting. The Kryn will be looking for ships, weapons, energy spikes. They will not notice rocks falling until it is too late." In orbit around Zephyrus Prime, Danny was making the military uncomfortable. He had been given command of a special operations unit, 50 of the best Zephyron soldiers. They were skilled fighters, but they had never fought the way Danny wanted them to. Again, Danny ordered as the simulation ended in failure. "You are still thinking too directly. The enemy has superior numbers and firepower. You cannot win by fighting fair. You have to make them chase you, split them up, lead them into traps." One of the soldiers, a veteran named Corvin, spoke up. "This is not how we fight. We face our enemies with honor." "Your honor will not matter when you are dead," Danny said bluntly. "Look, I respect your traditions, but the Kryn do not care about your honor. They will swarm you and tear you apart while you stand there fighting fair. Is that what you want?" The soldiers were quiet. They knew he was right, but it went against everything they believed. Danny softened his tone. "Honor is not about how you fight. It is about why you fight. You are fighting to protect your people, your families. There is no greater honor than that. The tactics do not matter. The result does." Slowly, they began to understand. The simulations improved. They learned to hit and run, to use the environment as a weapon, to think like hunters instead of soldiers. Danny pushed them hard, but he also showed them respect. These were good fighters. They just needed to learn a different way. Lisa had made a breakthrough in the medical labs. Working with Zephyron scientists, she had created a compound that would disrupt the Kryn's neural synchronization. It would not kill them, but it would break their hive-mind connection. The key was understanding their biology. Lisa explained to the science team, "The Kryn are not truly individual creatures. They are more like cells in a body, all receiving instructions from a central intelligence. Break that connection and they become lost." "How do we deploy it?" one scientist asked. "Atmospheric dispersion," Lisa said. "After the asteroid impacts, the survivors will be scattered and confused. We release the compound into the atmosphere. It will spread quickly and affect every Kryn on the planet. They will become disoriented, unable to coordinate. That is when your fleet moves in." It was elegant and brutal, exactly what the situation required. Sophie coordinated everything from the command center. She had created a timeline that accounted for hundreds of variables. Asteroid trajectories, evacuation schedules, fleet positioning, communication delays. Everything had to work perfectly or the plan would fail. She worked with Zephyron officers, teaching them to think flexibly. "Plans change," she told them repeatedly. "The enemy does something unexpected. Equipment fails, timing shifts. You have to be ready to adapt. Have backup plans for your backup plans." The Zephrons struggled with this at first. They liked certainty and structure. But Sophie was patient, showing them simulation after simulation where rigid plans failed and flexible thinking succeeded. Jake spent the time before the battle walking among the defenders. He visited Danny's special operations team, Chris's engineering crews, Lisa's medical units. He talked to regular soldiers, encouraged nervous technicians, listened to concerns from commanders. Commander Velith found him standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You should be resting, Captain. The battle begins tomorrow." "I have never been good at resting before a fight," Jake admitted. "Too much nervous energy. Are you afraid?" Jake considered the question honestly. "Yes, fear is healthy. It keeps you sharp. But I am also confident. We have a good plan and good people executing it. That is all any commander can ask for." Velith's colors shifted to curious blue. Your people must be remarkable if 5 of you can change the fate of an empire. We are just doing what needs to be done, Jake said. Humanity learned a long time ago that you cannot always rely on being the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes you have to be the smartest. Sometimes you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to survive. Even things that others might call dishonorable. There is nothing dishonorable about protecting your people, Jake said firmly. You are not attacking innocent civilizations or conquering for greed. You are defending your home against an enemy that wants to wipe you out. Use every tool you have. Fight with everything you can. Survive. That is the only honor that matters. The Kryn swarm arrived exactly on schedule. Thousands of organic ships dropped out of hyperspace and descended on the 3 empty colonies. Their sensors detected the massive amounts of organic material left behind, and they could not resist. The feeding frenzy began immediately. Kryn creatures swarmed over the colonies, consuming everything in sight. Buildings were torn apart, warehouses emptied. Even the soil itself was devoured. The swarm was focused entirely on feeding, just as the humans had predicted. In the command center, Jake watched the display with cold satisfaction. Confirm asteroid positions. Chris checked his calculations one more time. All 37 rocks are in position and accelerating. Impact in 3 minutes. Sophie had her timeline displayed, checking every step. Fleet is standing by. Medical teams ready. Special operations units in position. Danny added his report. Ground teams confirm the Kryn are fully committed to the surface. They have left minimal guards on their ships. Lisa stood ready with her biological weapon, compound loaded and ready for atmospheric release. Jake took a deep breath. This was it. Everything they had worked for came down to the next few minutes. All units stand by. Begin countdown. The first asteroid hit Colony 1 with the force of several nuclear weapons. The impact crater was visible from space, and the shockwave flattened everything for miles around. Thousands of Kryn were simply vaporized. Then the second asteroid hit. And the third? And the fourth. In less than 10 minutes, 37 asteroids fell on the 3 colonies. The devastation was total and absolute. 70% of the Kryn swarm was destroyed before they even understood what was happening. The survivors tried to retreat to their ships, but Danny's teams were waiting. Small, fast attack craft harassed the Kryn vessels, preventing them from organizing. The confused creatures scrambled into space, trying to regroup. That was when Lisa deployed the biological weapon. The compound spread through the atmosphere and out into space, invisible and deadly. The Kryn began to falter, their perfect coordination breaking down. The hive mind connection shattered, leaving millions of creatures confused and directionless. Now, Jake ordered, all fleet units engage. The Zephron fleet, which had been hiding behind the moon, surged forward. They fell upon the scattered Kryn with devastating efficiency. Without their hive mind coordination, the swarm was just a mob. Individual creatures tried to fight, but they were overwhelmed. The battle lasted only 6 hours. By the end, the Kryn swarm that had destroyed 17 civilizations was completely destroyed. Not a single Kryn ship escaped. News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The Kryn swarm, the unstoppable horror that had destroyed civilizations for centuries, had been defeated in less than a day. And it had been done by 5 beings from another dimension that no one had ever heard of before. Within a week, Zephyrus Prime was flooded with visitors. Ships arrived from dozens of star systems, all wanting to meet the legendary humans. Some came with offers of alliance and trade. Others came to assess whether humans were a new threat. A few came hoping to hire human mercenaries for their own conflicts. Jake found himself in meetings with alien dignitaries when he should have been figuring out how to get home. He was a military officer trained for combat and command. Playing diplomat with creatures that looked like living crystals, sentient clouds, and things he could not even describe was exhausting. Sophie helped as much as she could, taking notes and keeping track of who wanted what. The Karathi Federation wants to hire us as military advisors. The Plexian Union is offering a trade agreement for human tactical knowledge, and the Vren Collective just wants to study us like lab specimens. Tell them all we are not interested, Jake said tiredly. We just want to go home. They are not going to leave us alone, sir. We changed the balance of power in this galaxy. Everyone wants a piece of that. She was right, and Jake knew it. The humans had not just won a battle. They had demonstrated a completely different approach to warfare. Every military in the galaxy was now trying to understand and copy human tactics. Chris was in high demand from scientists and engineers. His modifications to Zephron technology had created breakthroughs in multiple fields. Energy generation, propulsion systems, even medical equipment worked better after he had tinkered with them. "I do not understand it," Peleth said, watching Chris work on a power converter. "You are changing things that should not be possible to change." "That is because you limit yourself," Chris explained. "You see a device and think it can only work one way because that is how it was designed. I see a device and think about all the ways it could work differently. Sometimes those ways are worse, but sometimes they are better." He finished his modifications and powered up the converter. It immediately began producing 20% more energy with the same input. Peleth stared in amazement. "You see?" Chris grinned. "Sometimes the best solutions are the ones nobody thinks to try." Danny had become a legend among the military. The special operations team he had trained performed so well during the battle that every military in the Zephron Empire wanted him to train their soldiers. He turned down most requests but agreed to create a training program that could be taught by Zephron instructors. "The key is mindset," Danny explained to a room full of senior officers. "Your soldiers are brave and skilled, but they think like soldiers. You need them to think like hunters, like predators. Teach them to use terrain, psychology, and misdirection. Make the enemy fight on your terms, not theirs." The officers took notes frantically. Some were uncomfortable with the ideas, but they could not argue with results. The tactics had worked against the Kryn, and they would work against other threats. Lisa had saved millions of lives beyond just the battle. Her medical protocols and biological weapons knowledge created a revolution in Zephron medicine. When a plague broke out on a nearby world, her methods contained it in days instead of months. Governments across the sector begged her to help with their own medical crises. But through it all, the 5 humans never stopped looking for a way home. The breakthrough came from young Peleth. She had been studying the energy signatures from the summoning ritual, trying to understand how the dimensional portal worked. Late one night, she burst into Chris's workshop with excitement lighting up her crystalline form. "I found it. I know how to send you home." Chris looked up from the engine he was rebuilding. "You figured out dimensional travel?" "Peleth, that is incredible. The dimensional barriers between universes are not constant," she explained rapidly. "They fluctuate based on gravitational forces. There are points where the barrier is thin, and creating a portal requires much less energy. I found a calculation that predicts when and where these thin points occur." "How long until the next one?" Chris asked. Peleth's glow dimmed slightly. 247 days, and it would require the combined energy output of 3 stars to create a stable portal. Chris whistled low. "That is a lot of power. But it is possible. That is what matters." The news spread quickly. The humans could go home, but it would take time and resources. Commander Veleth promised the Zephron Empire would provide whatever was needed. "You saved our civilization. Returning you to yours is the least we can do." But not everyone was happy about humans leaving. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. This was the first time the 5 humans saw the true power structure of the galaxy. Representatives from the oldest and most powerful civilizations gathered in a massive space station, and the humans were summoned to appear before them. High Magistrate Corvin of the Luminar was a being of pure energy, contained in a crystalline matrix. His species had existed for over 1,000,000 years, and his voice resonated across multiple dimensions when he spoke. "Captain Morrison, your presence in our galaxy has created significant disruption. Some call you heroes. Others call you dangerous primitives who got lucky. The council is divided on what to do about you." Jake stood straight, meeting the magistrate's energy pattern without flinching. "We did not ask to be here. We were pulled from our home without warning or consent. All we want is to return." "And that may be the problem," another council member said. This one was a Vraxian, looking like a floating jellyfish made of metal. "You have demonstrated capabilities that threaten the established order. What happens when your people learn they are not alone? What happens when Earth develops the technology to cross dimensions on their own?" Sophie stepped forward. "Are you actually suggesting we should not be allowed to go home because you are afraid of what might happen in the future? That is paranoid and unjust." "It is cautious," Corvin said. "We have maintained peace in this galaxy for thousands of years by careful balance. You humans are chaos. You ignore rules, challenge conventions, and turn everything upside down. You have been here less than a month and already changed how half the galaxy thinks about warfare. Good, Danny said bluntly. Maybe the galaxy needed to change. You were so busy maintaining your careful balance that you let the Kryn swarm destroy 17 civilizations. How many people died because you were too cautious to act? The chamber erupted in argument. Some council members agreed with Danny. Others were outraged at his audacity. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Lisa spoke up, her quiet voice somehow cutting through the chaos. You are afraid of us. That is understandable. We are unknown, unpredictable, and we have proven we can be dangerous. But being afraid is not a reason to imprison us. We have done nothing wrong. We helped people who needed help. Is that really something to punish? Corvin was silent for a long moment. Then his energy pattern shifted to something that might have been amusement. You are absolutely right. Fear is not justice. The Luminar have existed for 1,000,000 years because we learned to adapt to change, not fight against it. The humans will be allowed to return home. Not everyone agreed, but Corvin's word was law. The council session ended with humanity's fate secured. They could go home. But first, they had to survive 8 more months in a galaxy that was still deciding whether to fear or embrace them. The months passed slowly for the 5 humans. They had become celebrities across multiple star systems, but all they wanted was to go home. Chris and Pelith worked on the portal technology, running countless simulations. Danny continued training special forces units. Lisa helped with medical crises on various worlds. Sophie documented everything, creating a comprehensive record of their time in this dimension, and Jake served as an advisor to the Galactic Council, helping them understand strategic thinking. The portal array was built in orbit around Zephyros Prime. 3 massive energy collectors were positioned to harvest the output of nearby stars. The construction took 6 months and required cooperation from a dozen different civilizations. It was the largest joint project the galaxy had undertaken in centuries, and it was all to send 5 humans home. With 3 days remaining until the dimensional alignment, everything seemed perfect. The energy collectors were charged and ready. The calculations had been checked and rechecked. Chris was confident the portal would work. Then the Vexor coalition attacked. 50 warships dropped out of hyperspace with no warning. They were heavily armed and clearly meant business. Their commander, War Leader Krell, broadcast his message across all frequencies. The humans are a threat to galactic stability. They will be eliminated. Anyone who protects them will be destroyed. Alarms blared throughout Zephyros Prime. The Zephyrin fleet scrambled to respond, but they were outnumbered. The Vexor had brought enough firepower to level the entire planet, and their primary target was obvious: the portal array that would send the humans home. Jake and his team were in the command center within minutes. Commander Velith was coordinating the defense, but his colors showed stress and fear. We cannot hold them off. They have too many ships and they are targeting the portal collectors. If they destroy those collectors, we cannot go home, Sophie said quietly. We will be stuck here forever. Danny pulled up the tactical display, analyzing the Vexor formation. They are using standard attack patterns. Overwhelming firepower, direct assault. They think numbers and strength are all they need. They have not been paying attention to what we taught you, Jake said to Velith. Pull your fleet back to the planetary defense grid. Make it look like you are retreating. But that will leave the orbital stations vulnerable. Trust me, Jake said firmly. Chris, can you repurpose the energy collectors? The engineer was already working on it, his fingers flying across the controls. Maybe. They are designed to collect and focus stellar energy. If I redirect the output instead of storing it, I could create a weapon. But I need time and I need the Vexor ships to be in the right position. Sophie understood immediately. We need to give them a target they cannot resist. Something that makes them think they have won. The portal array, Lisa said. If they think we are trying to escape, they will focus everything on stopping us. Jake nodded. Danny, make the array look like it is powering up for emergency activation. Make it convincing. On it, Danny said, already accessing the systems. The plan came together with the chaotic speed that defined human thinking. The Zephyron fleet pulled back, making it look like a panicked retreat. The portal array began glowing brighter, its energy collectors focusing on a single point. To the Vexor, it looked like the humans were desperately trying to open a portal and escape. War Leader Krell saw his chance. All ships converge on the portal array. Do not let them escape! The Vexor fleet clustered together, focusing their weapons on the glowing collectors. Their overlapping shields created interference patterns, each ship affecting the others. It was exactly what the humans needed. Chris watched the tactical display, waiting for the perfect moment. The Vexor ships were packed tight, their shields interfering with each other. "Now, Jake, give the order now." "Fire!" Jake commanded. The energy collectors redirected their stored power in an instant. 3 stars worth of concentrated energy lanced out in a single beam. It hit the center of the Vexor formation with devastating force. The shields, already interfering with each other, collapsed immediately. The beam tore through one ship after another, their hulls vaporizing in microseconds. The Vexor formation simply ceased to exist, erased by physics and human ingenuity. 37 ships were destroyed in less than 10 seconds. The surviving Vexor vessels tried to retreat, but the Zephron fleet was ready. They engaged with tactics Danny had taught them, using hit-and-run attacks and coordinated strikes. The Zephrons fought with a ferocity that shocked their enemies. They were no longer the honor-bound warriors who fought fair battles. They were defenders protecting their home, and they used every advantage they had. War Leader Krell's command ship limped away, barely functional. His last transmission before fleeing was filled with disbelief. "What are you?" Jake answered, his voice carrying across space. "We are humans, and you just learned why you should never threaten us or our allies." The battle was over in less than 2 hours. The Vexor Coalition fleet was destroyed, and the galaxy had just witnessed something incredible. 5 humans had defeated a force 50 times their number using nothing but strategy and captured stellar energy. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The debate was fierce. Some members argued that humans were too dangerous to exist. Others insisted they were exactly what the galaxy needed. High Magistrate Corvin listened to all arguments before making his judgment. "The humans will return to their dimension as planned, but we will not forget what they taught us. True strength comes not from technology or numbers, but from will, creativity, and the refusal to give up. These are lessons this galaxy desperately needs." 3 days later, during the celestial alignment, the portal opened. It shimmered with rainbow colors, a stable tunnel between dimensions. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy had gathered to witness the humans' departure. The Zephrons they had saved, the soldiers they had trained, the scientists they had taught. All of them came to say goodbye. Commander Velith approached Jake one final time. His crystalline form glowed with warm colors. "You gave us more than victory, Captain. You gave us hope. You showed us that no matter how impossible something seems, there is always a way forward." Jake shook Velith's 3-fingered hand, having taught the commander the human gesture. "You would have figured it out eventually. We just helped you see it sooner." Sophie hugged Pelith tightly. The young scientist had become a close friend during their time working together. "Keep asking questions. Keep pushing boundaries. That is how you change the universe." Chris left behind detailed technical notes that would keep Zephron engineers busy for years. Danny's training programs would create generations of tactical thinkers. Lisa's medical breakthroughs would save countless lives across multiple worlds. As they prepared to step through the portal, Jake turned back one last time. "Commander, if you ever need us again, find a way to call. Humans never abandon their allies." "I will remember," Velith promised, his colors shifting through a spectrum of emotions. The 5 humans stepped through the portal together. Reality twisted around them, and for a moment they existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Then the cafeteria of Orbital Station 7 snapped back into focus. Jake was still holding his coffee mug, now cold. Sophie's datapad showed the same time display as when they left. Their chronometers indicated only 3 seconds had passed, but they all remembered 8 months in another dimension. "Did that actually happen?" Lisa whispered. Sophie checked her datapad. All her notes were still there. Thousands of pages of documentation from their time in the other dimension. "It happened." Chris pulled out a small crystal from his pocket. It glowed faintly with internal light. "Pelith gave me this. It is a quantum communicator, linked across dimensions. If they ever need us, they can call." Danny laughed, shaking his head. "We just saved an entire galaxy and nobody here will ever know." "That is okay," Jake said, looking at his team with pride. "We know, and somewhere out there an entire dimension learned something important. You should never underestimate humanity. We are not the biggest or the strongest or the most advanced, but we never give up. We adapt, we overcome, and we protect those who need protecting." He raised his cold coffee mug. To the 5 humans who shook the universe. They laughed and clinked their containers together before returning to their regular duties. But they kept the quantum communicator safe, knowing that someday they might be needed again. In another dimension, the Zephron Empire flourished. They shared everything they had learned from the humans with other civilizations. New alliances formed. Old enemies found common ground. The rigid structures that had governed the galaxy for millennia began to change, becoming more flexible and creative. The story of the 5 humans became legend. Parents told it to their children as a tale of hope. Military academies studied it as the perfect example of tactical thinking. Philosophers debated what it meant that spirit could triumph over raw power. And every time someone faced an impossible challenge, they remembered the humans. They remembered that 5 ordinary people with nothing but determination and creativity had defeated armies and changed the fate of an entire galaxy, because that was what humans did. They looked at impossible situations and made them possible. They saw obstacles and found solutions. They faced overwhelming odds and refused to